This is the Reporter's Notebook, hosted by Elaine Shane.
Welcome to this entry in the DTN Reporter's Notebook. DTN Senior Ag Meteorologist Bryce Anderson joins us today as we look at the fall weather outlook. Bryce, what's the primary feature that you're seeing for the fall season weather pattern?
Well, Elaine, there has been a developing and still consistent El Nino in the central and eastern Pacific that actually began during the past spring and has intensified. This El Nino has water temperatures in the equatorial Pacific that are very close to the values that a very strong El Nino had back in 1997. Water temperatures from South America west have been running about 3 degrees Celsius above average, and the atmospheric circulation with that, as defined by the Southern Oscillation Index, has been a consistent El Nino type of pattern. So we've had both the atmosphere and the temperature work together. So for this fall season, El Nino is going to be the primary driver of the atmospheric features across the heart of the country.
So how will El Nino play into the fall harvest?
Well, there's a very high correlation with some of the fall trends when El Nino is in effect. And since we have such a strong one at this point, then, those correlations certainly have a lot of validity to them at this time. And the big feature for this fall is that over the northwestern part of the Corn Belt, from central Iowa through Minnesota, the Dakotas, and into Nebraska, the likelihood is that it's going to be wet. That we're going to have above normal precipitation, temperatures that are going to be near to below normal, and so the impact there would be delayed harvest and kind of a slow harvest at that, and that means that it's going to probably consume more fuel, and also grain drying might have to be done. More fuel is going to have to be used to run grain dryers. Farther to the east, it's not as likely, but this northwestern Corn Belt situation is certainly a hallmark with the pattern that we have.
Does every area expect to have a wetter season because of El Nino? Not
all areas do, fortunately. The eastern Corn Belt, where it's been so difficult this year, we've talked about that, how wet it's been, and then drier in the late summer and so forth. The eastern Corn Belt has normal precipitation in store, and so I think that that's going to be maybe a little bit more advantageous for harvest progress in that part of the country. The southern plains are likely to have above normal precipitation as well, and so that section of our general growing areas would join with the northern and the northwestern Corn Belt in terms of possibly having a slower harvest progress scenario.
Can you give us more on how it's going to affect the wheat belt?
Well, I think that that's one thing that is going to be pretty decent for this fall, because with El Nino and greater precipitation for the southern plains, that should be pretty good for wheat moisture to get wheat started in the winter wheat belt of Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas, thinking about the 2016 harvest. So that is one advantage that shows up along with pasture and late season hay and those sorts of forage crops.
When I was in Arizona recently, they said they love El Nino because they get the rain. Now, there's been some really drought areas in the especially southwest and into California. What does El Nino mean for them?
If El Nino stays around through November and December, like it appears it's going to because of the intensity, then there's a pretty decent chance that that far west drought is going to have some relief, some mitigation. But to think that El Nino is going to be the one and only event that breaks the drought and brings back moisture to normal levels, that's not going to happen. I mean, it's going to take a lot more than that. And while we're talking about the western third of the country, El Nino is a dry weather maker in the northwestern U.S. So the drought in Oregon and Idaho and Washington is not likely to have much relief with El Nino. So there are definitely have and have not scenarios for far west U.S. precipitation with El Nino.
Thanks, Bryce.
You're welcome.
With Bryce Anderson, I'm Elaine Shane, and that's today's entry in the DTN Reporter's Notebook. Thanks for joining us, and have a good evening from DTN.
This has been the Reporter's Notebook from the DTN Progressive Farmer Newsroom.